Hi there, I'm Chase Gustafson, and with my partner Ismail Masoudi, we will be covering Unit 2 of the AP World History curriculum. Topic 2, Subunit 1, the Silk Roads. More than 1,300 years after the first account of travel on the Silk Roads, these fabled routes that had fallen into disuse had revived by 8th and 9th centuries. As described by merchant Peglotti, the land route of the Silk Roads was vibrant and essential to integrational trade in the 14th and 15th centuries. The Crusades were a big factor to help pave the way to expand networks of exchange. As lords and their armies of knights brought back fabrics and spices from the east, global trade increased due to people being eager to get each other's products. New products for now on the Silk Road, for example, Tang China had much to offer the newly revived global trade network, including the compass, paper, and gunpowder. The rise of the Mongol Empire had the most significant impact on the expansion of trade. Mongols conquered the Abbasid Caliphate in 1258, and in the 14th century China came under their control as well. The parts of the Silk Road that were under the authority of different rulers were, for the first time, unified in a system under the control of the authority that respected merchants and enforced laws. The Mongols improved roads and punished bandits, both of which increased the safety of travel on the Silk Roads. New trade channels were also established between Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and Europe. Those who survived the conquest by the Mongols and their descendants benefited from the reinvigoration of trade routes that had been heavily used since the days of the Roman and Han Empires. Another reason that there's a growth of networks of exchange after 1200 was there was an improvement of transportation. Travelers learned that traveling with others in caravans was safer than traveling alone. They learned designs for saddles and for camels that increased the weight of the load the animals could carry, which increased profits. The new inventions of the Chinese magnetic compass aided their navigation skills and ship control along the seas. Some of the effects of the growth of exchange after 1200 was the series of oases that developed along the routes and commercial innovations that helped manage the increasing trade. Long stretches of the Silk Road passed through inhospitable terrain. Hot, arid lands where water was hard to come across. Cities along the routes that were watered by rivers became thriving centers of trade. Travelers on the Silk Roads depend on these cities for abundances of water and food. These were the crossroads of both ideas and goods where people trade and learn. Once the routes of the Silk Road became stabilized, inns known as caravanserai sprang up, often about 100 miles apart. That distance is how far camels could travel before they needed water. At the caravanserai, travelers could rest both themselves and their animals, and sometimes trade their animals for fresh ones. The word caravanserai derives from the Persian words for caravan and palace. Now let's look at the increased trade that affected commercial innovations. To manage the increasing trade, China developed new financial systems. China had long been a money economy, which means they use money rather than bartering with commodities such as shells or salt. The copper coins they used have become too unwieldy to transport for everyday transactions, so they developed the flying cash system. This allowed a merchant to deposit paper money under his name in one location and withdraw the same amount in another location. Locations for exchanging flying cash became the model for banks of the modern era, including the banking houses established in European cities in the 1300s. At a banking house, a person could present a bill of exchange with which a document stating the holder a legally promised payment of a set amount on a set date and could receive that amount of money in exchange. Each of these innovations encouraged and supported trade by providing convenience and the stability of institutions. The growing demand for luxury goods in Afro-Eurasia, China, Persia, and India led to a corresponding increase in the supply of those goods through expanded production. Craft workers expanded their production on such goods as silk and other textiles and porcelains for export. Increased demand also led to the expansion of iron and steel manufactured in China, motivating its proto-industrialization.
Topic 2, Subunit 2, the Mongol Empire and the Modern World. The Mongols of Central Asia marched across Eurasia during the 13th century with destruction and chaos behind them. Many writers spoke of their atrocities. However, during this time, it was also a time of integral connection and exchange at a level that was not present in the world for over 1,000 years. In the 12th century, the Mongols were multiple clans of pastoral nomads who were hunter-foragers in north of the Gobi Desert. They were all very skilled horse riders and had courage in hunting and warfare. They were surrounded by other tribes such as the Tatars and the Namans in the Merkits, as well as the powerful Jurchen in northern China. The Mongol leader Temujin was born in 1162. He spent his life building alliances and power by marrying the daughter of the neighboring king or Khan. He was ruthless and used loyalty to run his kingdom. In 1206, he gathered Mongol chieftains at a meeting called a Kurultai, where he was elected Genghis Khan, or the ruler of all. In 1210, his troops attacked the powerful Jin Empire to the east and led a brutal campaign which wiped out civilian populations of entire towns after defeating armies. The Mongols conquered both Central Asia, Karakati Kingdom, and the Islamic Khwarizm Empire in the west by 1227. Genghis Khan's kingdom reached from northern China to East Persia. His troops were fearsome, skilled, rode horses, and were proficient with bows. Their special units to prepare for their attacks and which way to attack their enemies. The Mongols used the weapons and technologies of the people they conquered. For example, they exploited the expertise of Persian and Chinese engineers to produce siege weapons such as portable towers that were used to attack walls and catapults that hold stones or objects. The Pax Mongolica was a period of peace in the Mongols' governing. Institution policies such as liberal policies were used during this time. Channels and trade networks were developed through the Silk Road and was established between Asia and the Middle East, Africa, and Europe. 3 of Genghis Khan's sons set up their own conquests that expanded the empire further, but 2, a son of Genghis Khan's son, in 1236 led a Mongolian army of 100,000 soldiers into Russia, which army became known as the Golden Horde. They conquered the capital city of Kiev, looted and destroyed it. They planned on continuing forward, pushing westward, but was later brought back and had to attend the funeral of the great Khan, then losing interest in Europe. The city of Moscow began collecting tributes to develop an army to resist the Mongols and began building an anti-Mongol coalition among the Russian city-states. After a battle during the Battle of Kufilkovo, the Mongols' influence began to decline in Russia, which the Mongols' descendants were defeated. Hu Lego led Western armies. He was another grandson of Genghis Khan. He led those armies in Abbasid territories where they destroyed the city of Baghdad and killed the caliph. Christian and Muslims both viewed the Mongols as a threat and created a temporary alliance which defeated them, and his kingdom was called the Il Caliphate in Central Asia, which stretched from the Byzantium to the Oxus River, which is now called Amurda. Eventually, most Mongols, and himself included, converted to Islam. Simultaneously, in the eastern part of China, the Mongolian Empire and his third grandson, Kublai Khan, set his sights on China. China was currently ruled by the Song dynasty, a very formidable opponent. From 1235 to 1271, Kublai Khan attempted to conquer China. In 1260, Kublai assumed the title of Great Khan, and 11 years later, he finally defeated the Chinese. This established the Yun dynasty, which built its capital at Zhongdu, which was previously destroyed by the Mongols. Kublai Khan was extremely good at governing a large and diverse territory by instituting policies of religious tolerance which valued loyalty. Mongolian women led more independent lives than in other societies. Unfortunately, Mongolian leaders eventually alienated many Chinese and dismantled the civil exam. Although the policy was one of tolerance, many Mongol leaders alienated the Chinese in many ways. Starting in 1274, the Mongolian rulers failed to expand. In the 1350s, a secret society called the White Lotus began organizing to rebel against the Yuan dynasty. In 1368, Zhu Long, a Buddhist monk, founded the Ming dynasty, which led to a decline in power for the Mongols. Overall, the Mongols created a larger empire than the Romans and was the largest continuous land empire in history. There was a period of peace called the Pax Mongolica, which revitalized trade and connection of cultural exchange and was ubiquitous throughout the world. The bubonic plague followed the Mongols as they traveled throughout the world.
Topic 2, Subunit 3, Exchange in the Indian Ocean. South Asia, with its location in the center of the Indian Ocean, benefited enormously from the trade in the Indian Ocean basin. Although some of the causes of expanded trade in the ocean basin were the same of those of expanded over land routes, some related specifically to ocean travel and knowledge. As the Indian Ocean trade grew, so did the demand for specialized products. Every region involved in trade had something special to offer its trading partners. For example, India was well known for its high quality of its fabrics, particularly cotton. People went there for excellent carpets and high carbon steel that was used for knives and swords. Enslaved people taken in the Indian Ocean trade suffered fates different from those taken across the Atlantic. Those in the Indian Ocean trade were more likely to provide forced labor in seaports, in the shipping industry, and as household servants. Some worked as sailors or even soldiers, living in towns or cities. They had more opportunity to develop communities and to work alongside free laborers than did enslaved people taken to the Americas. Enslaved people who ended up in the Islamic communities had certain rights, such as the right to marry. As a result of the Indian Ocean slave trade, African words, musical styles, and customs can be found in Oman, India, and elsewhere. There was also advances in maritime technology. Arab sailors invented the triangular lateen sails they used, but the sails were popular because sailors found that the triangular shape could easily catch winds coming from many different locations. Chinese sailors during the classical period had invented the stern rudder, which gave their ships more stability and made them easier to maneuver. The astrolabe improved Muslim navigators in the 12th century allowed sailors to determine how far north or south they were from the equator. Some of the very factors that caused expansion of exchange networks in the Indian Ocean also in time became effects. The increased demand for products caused trade to expand. At the same time, however, it resulted in several effects along with a long-lasting impact. For example, to meet rising demand, producers needed to find ways to become more efficient, to grow crops, to make more textiles, to maneuver more iron, manufacture more iron. In some places, the role of the state increased even with more to oversee these efforts at efficiency and to raise money through customs, which was taxes on imported goods and fees for the use of seaports. The Indian Ocean trade also created thriving city-states along the east coast of Africa, sometimes known as Swahili city-states. The traders on the coast of these city-states sold gold, ivory, and enslaved people to their Arab trading partners, as well as more exotic goods such as tortoise shells, peacock feathers, and rhinoceros horns. There was also significant cultural transfers. The transfer of knowledge, cultural technology, and religion intensified as a result of thriving trade in the Indian Ocean basin. The voyages of the Muslim admiral Zhang He, 1371 to 1433, reflect this transfer, as well as the conflicts it sometimes generated. Zhang He traveled to Indonesia, Ceylon, and other coastal cities on the Indian Ocean, to Arabia, and to the east coast of Africa, as well to the Cape of Good Hope. The main purpose of these voyages were to display the might of the Ming Dynasty to the rest of the world and to receive tribute from the people he encountered. Zhang's fleet was impressive at its height. His fleet included more than 300 ships that carried 28,000 people. The expeditions won prestige for the Chinese government and opened up new markets for Chinese goods.
Topic 2, Subunit 4, Trans-Saharan Trade Routes. Societies inhabited the desert because of its arid climate, and when that Mali Empire took over, on the early commerce expanded dramatically. But Batatu, a Muslim scholar, merchants used caravans to facilitate commerce, trading gold, ivory, hides, and slaves. Camels are very important to travel because they could consume large quantities of water and do not need any more for a long time. Saddles were developed to ride such camels, and without those saddles, camels could not have been used to carry heavy loads of goods. Caravans traveled thousands with only goods and enough food to make travel. By the end of the 8th century, the trans-Saharan desert trade had become more famous throughout Europe and Asia. Gold was a precious commodity. For more than 700 years, trans-Saharan trade brought considerable culture to societies of West Africa, particularly Ghana and Mali. Islam was spread and brought into the sub-Saharan Africa. Mali rose as a trade society in the 9th century. The governor of Mali profited from the gold trade and tax on all trade entry of West Africa. Timbuktu was a great city in Gaul, which both accommodated wealth and developed into centers of Muslim life. Such growth in trade resulted in an administration being needed. Rulers established the currency, which was widely understood. Cowrie shells, cotton cloth, gold, glass, beads, and salt was used as currency. Distant cultures were brought into together due to trade and networks. The founding rulers of Mali, Sun Duta, became a legend. He was named the Lion's Prince because when he returned to his kingdom after he was left for dead on his birth, he defeated his enemies and reclaimed the throne for himself. Mansa Musa, in the 14th century, Sudita's grandnephew, brought more fame to the region. He was a religious leader for his political and economic acumen. Was a devout Muslim that became a pilgrimage in 1324, Islam's holy city. He had extraordinary pilgrimage with hundreds of caravans and thousands of slaves and soldiers. He established religious schools and textbooks to build trading cities and sponsors those who wanted to continue their religious studies elsewhere after his pilgrimage back. Mansa Musa's death, a measly 100 years after, the kingdom was already declining. By the late 1400s, the Songhai kingdom had taken his place as a powerhouse in West Africa and became a large and richer kingdom than Mali. Mansa Musa was the wealthiest man in history.
Topic 2, Subunit 5. Cultural consequences of connectivity. Goods, people, and ideas traveled with relative freedom through the networks of exchange in Afro-Eurasia, and the years between 1200 and 1450. One reason for this free exchange was the stability of the Mongol Empire and the protection they offered merchants and travelers. Technological developments such as gunpowder and paper from China were diffused by trade, literacy, and artistic interactions, and cultural exchanges were documented by travelers such as Marco Polo and Ibn Battuta, who told of the wonders they saw and extraordinary people they met. The known world became a larger place. The diffusion of different religions between 1200 and 1450 had varying effects. In some cases, the new religion served to unify people and provide justification for a kingdom's leadership. It also influenced the literary and artistic cultures of areas to which it spread, where themes, subjects, and styles were inspired by spreading religion, and other places either fused or coexisted with native religions. The interactions resulting from increased trade also led to technological innovations that helped shape the era. Through trade, the Indian regions of Hinduism and Buddhism made their way to Southeast Asia as well. The sea-based empire on Sumatra was a Hindu kingdom, while later the kingdom on Java was Buddhist. The South Asian land-based dynasties in Sri Lanka became centers of Buddhist study with many monasteries. Buddhism influence was so strong under the dynasties that Buddhist priests often advised monarchs on matters of government. Through merchants, missionaries, and conquests, Islam spread over a wide area of Africa, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. Along with religion, science, and technology traveled the trade routes. Islamic scholars translated Greek literary classics into Arabic, saving the works of Aristotle and other Greek thinkers from oblivion. Scholars also brought back mathematics texts from India and techniques of papermaking from China. They studied medicine from ancient Greece, Mesopotamians, and Egyptians, making advancements in hospital care, including surgery. Seafaring technology improved with the stern rudder and astrolabe, and the magnetic compass, as Chinese, Indian, and Southwest Asians expanded their knowledge of astronomy and other aspects of the natural world. Production of gunpowders and guns spread from China and influenced warfare as well. Knowledge of the world beyond Western Europe increased as crusaders encountered both Byzantine and Islamic cultures. The encounters also increased demand in Europe for newfound wares from the East and opening up global trade. However, Europeans also opened themselves to disease. The plague, referred to as the Black Death, was introduced to Europe by way of trading routes. A major epidemic broke out between 1347 and 1351. Additional outbreaks occurred over the succeeding decades. As many as 25 million people in Europe may have died from the plague, which, with drastically reduced populations, economic activity declined in Europe. In particular, a shortage of people to work on the land with lasting effects on the feudal system. Also, exposure to new ideas from Byzantium and the Muslim world would contribute to the Renaissance and the subsequent rise of secularism. At just 21 years old, Ibn Battuta, 1304 to 1355, set out to see the world as a Muslim scholar. Over 30 years, he traveled through Central Asia, Southeast Asia, South Asia, China, Spain, North Africa, and Mali, mainly the Muslim lands. He then wrote a book after he told his tales to the Sultan of Morocco. He wrote about the places he visited and their cultures. Unlike Polo, Battuta had the view of a Muslim that was devoted to his faith, and journey was a large part to learn as much as he could about Islam and its people and accomplishments.
Although trade networks spread agriculture progress, most dramatic environmental consequence was the bubonic plague, or the Black Death, that swept across Central Asia and all over the world. Few crops had as much significance as champa rice, which was introduced by Vietnam, a Hindu state, and then offered to China as tribute, which we covered back in Unit 1. It had amazing drought-resistant qualities and was widely distributed to China. Terrace farming and paddies in lowlands only skyrocketed the amount of champa rice being produced. In Indonesia, seafarers traveling across Indian Ocean introduced bananas to sub-Saharan Africa. This nutrition-rich food led to spike in populations. Indonesian settlements traveled back to Madagascar. Cows conquering land beyond the Arabian Peninsula spread Islam, which is with such cultivation of cotton, sugar, and teacher crops, which are now available in different markets. The market of San Mascarend was, for example, introduced any fruits and vegetables, as well as rice and citrus from Southwest Asia to Europe. Europeans' demand to sugar would become so high that they became a key factor in massive enslaved people in the Americas in the 1500s and after. With so much increase in population and pressure put on natural resources, overgrazing outside of Zimbabwe was so severe that it later was abandoned in the 1400s. Deforestation led to soil erosion and a decrease in agricultural progress. Even in Dar al-Islam and India, where medical advances were being produced, no knowledge at the time could have prevented the spread of disease of the bubonic plague. The Black Death had tremendous impact in killing 1/3 of the population of Europe in only a few years. Agriculture production continued to decline. Each person's labor became more valuable. Thus, they could demand a higher wage. This shift helped lay the groundwork for developments as feudalism declined. The Black Death led to similar loss of life in areas including North Africa, China, Central Asia. About 2 million Chinese and other Asians died. South Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa was spared because there are fewer trading forces in those regions.
Topic 2. Subunit 7. Comparison of economic exchange. First, let's talk about the similarities along the networks of exchange. The Silk Roads through the Gobi Desert and mountain passes in China and Central Asia to Southwest Asia and Europe. on which merchants tended to specialize in luxury goods. This was similar to the monsoon-dependent trade routes in the Indian Ocean, linking East Asia similar to the monsoon with Southeast Asia, South Asia, and Southwest Asia, on which merchants exchanged goods too heavy to transport by land. Yes, again, this was similar to the trans-Saharan trade routes from North Africa and Mediterranean basin across the desert to West and East Africa, on which merchants traded salt from North Africa with gold from the kingdom south of the desert. While each exchange network had unique characteristics, all were similar in the origins, purpose, and effects. They all originated when kingdoms and empires expanded. So did the trade routes they controlled and traveled. The trading network shared an overall economic purpose, which was to exchange what people were able to grow or produce for what they wanted, needed, or could use to trade for other items. In other words, their purpose was primarily economic. All the exchange networks also experienced similar effects because of the very nature of a network, which can be described as a fabric of cords crossing at regular distances, knotted for strength at the crossings. The trade routes all gave rise to trading cities, then not that held the network together. Now let's discuss the differences among networks of exchange. The differences can be found especially in the goods they exchanged, the nature of the routes and the transportation, the technologies they inspired, and the religions they spread. The Silk Roads used animals to travel with saddles on them, and the religions they spread were Buddhism, Neo-Confucianism, and Islam. Some of the goods that they traded were silk, tea, and spices from the east, and horses, saddle, and textiles from the west. The Indian Ocean route used boats to travel with technology such as the magnetic compass and astrolabe, and the religions that spread were Buddhism, Neo-Confucianism, Islam, and Christianity. Some of the goods that were traded were gold, ivory, and quartz from East Africa, then citrus, fruits, and books from Southwest Asia, and finally textiles, peppers, and pearls from southern India. For trans-Saharan trade route, they used camels with saddles and walked in groups known as caravans for traveling, and mainly Islam spread on this route. The goods that were traded on this route were horses, books, and salt from the north, and gold, ivory, cloth, and enslaved people from the south.